I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James Whitefield, yes, Mina Kimes. All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays. What's going on, everyone? Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, coming at you with another episode of Pats Daily, brought to you by our good friends at Prize Picks and Game Time. And today, I'm honored to be joined by Paul Kuharsky. He's a 25-year veteran covering the NFL, been a little bit all over the place, but most importantly for this conversation, he's been in Tennessee for quite some time and for the entirety of Mike Vrabel's tenure there as head coach. And with Mike Vrabel actually just completing his interview somewhere in Boston, you can go in the comments and say where you think he might have been. The interview is complete, and as we all know, it feels like Mike Vrabel is the leading candidate. So for an idea of what Mike Vrabel was like leading in Tennessee and also what he might bring to the Patriots, we're going to get some of Paul's insights. So thank you so much for joining me, man. I really appreciate the time. How are you doing, and how has the early part of the offseason treated you so far after what's been a tough year for both franchises, both top 5 picks this season?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a crappy week here. Fired the GM who kind of got Vrabel fired a year ago, ran Carthon out. Chad Brinker assuming full football power here a year after he kind of hopscotched Carthon outside of personnel power. And voice of the Titans, Mike Keith, who's been the radio play-by-play man and huge ambassador for this team, going back to his alma mater today. So he's called everything for this team since 1998, wow. I think.
The most recognizable voices in radio, too. I can hear it right now.
Called the Music City Miracle 25 years ago yesterday. Going back to his alma mater, a job that does not come open very often, but going to call basketball and football for the Vols. And Titans at a really low point right now, really need not just the game day stuff, but he's a guy that could put a happy face on a lot of bad stuff. So it's kind of cherry on top of all the bad stuff that's happened for the Titans that he's leaving.
I'm sorry to hear about that, brother, but hopefully we can go back to the Vrabel era, maybe some happy memories. And I'm actually going to kick off with your impression of Mike Vrabel during your time covering him. Obviously, had plenty of ups, but also had some downs towards the end of his tenure. So I'm curious, during his time and your time covering him, what was he like as a coach for you when you were actually covering him as a reporter, all that stuff?
Well, I like him a lot. I wrestled with him, frequently because he's a difficult guy from a media perspective. Not Belichickian. People really overcast him as being like Bill. And he's got a little bit of Bill in him, but he's in no way a Belichick disciple like guys who coached for Bill and went out into the league and mostly failed are. Certainly an influence, but he's also been influenced by other guys. He played in Pittsburgh, played briefly in Kansas City, was worked at Ohio State, worked for the Texans. Cites his high school coach who I met also as a big influence. His dad was a coach, was a big influence. But Mike Vrabel's a good football coach who doesn't let much get by him. Super prepared. Gave his guys 3 points of emphasis every week and told them if they did these 3 things, if we get 2 turnovers, if we hold them under 75 yards rushing, if we sack the quarterback 3 times, we will win this game. And guys said, it was like a 90% hit rate that if they did the 3 things that he told them they needed to do, they would win a football game. Now, he was better early than he was late. The last 2 years were bad. The roster got thinned out. There were times with the poor roster that he squeezed more out of them than he had business doing. But those last 2 years, it was maybe asking too much, and he lost some of his magic. But there's a reason why he's the hottest prospect on the market now, and it was a surprise to many of us that he didn't get a job last year.
And we'll dive deeper into what it was that made him successful early before we get into some of those later years. Because when you say the points of emphasis, it's funny. That is kind of Belichickian there because the players his last season were saying the same thing. They were losing, but they're like, hey, in the meetings, Bill's telling us what to do. Even Mayo had his points of emphasis, but obviously Vrabel's a guy who's done it and did have that measure of success. So what was it that allowed them to not only, obviously they just barely missed the playoffs this first season, then 3 years in a row they get there, didn't always win when they were in the playoffs, but still were a team that it felt like nobody wanted to play during that stretch.
Yeah, I went to a championship game when they weren't as talented as teams they beat. They beat the Patriots along the way there.
Brady's Patriots career.
Yeah, beat the Ravens in Baltimore when the Ravens were a much more talented team, it seemed like, and hung with Kansas City for a little while at Arrowhead. 3 games on the road, a crazy stretch. And that's a team that started very poorly with Marcus Mariota under center. And changed to Ryan Tannehill and then got hot and went a long way. Really good at building a culture, having guys believe in things, follow, understands players, told them if you've got something that comes up at home, just let me know. It's not a big deal. Hands-on on the field, jumps on blocking sleds, gets hands-on with offensive linemen, gets hands-on with outside linebackers and defensive linemen, positions that he played successfully in the league. Got the respect of key guys. And, if you were in his doghouse, it was tough to get out. And so I think, you really had to work to earn his trust, but it really meant something. He designed some things. There was a game early in his career where they beat the Texans, where they were without their top 2 tackles, their quarterback. They ran some wildcat with Derrick Henry. He had no business winning it, and he kind of put it together with tape. It's a really impressive win. The kind that again, in the last 2 years, he didn't have as much of a core to win with. He's good with like fringe players. He could patch people in as long as he had, I thought, kind of a spine to the team. But in those last 2 years, it was maybe too much for him to overcome. And I think, he has a big ego, and it grew as he had success in Tennessee, and it maybe helped undo him a little bit, though I didn't think it warranted him being fired. I think it warranted more of a reset than they were willing to offer him.
And we'll get into that as well. But I'm curious, you mentioned the doghouse, because with the Patriots, the biggest issue with Gerard Mayo was just the erosion of the culture. Things were obviously bad under Bill Belichick, but especially the defense, you still saw they were tough. They were disciplined, and you had guys that clearly bought into what was being sold. But with the Patriots under Gerard Mayo, you had players starting to talk out more than usual. It didn't feel like things were as buttoned up. Even had one player criticize the fan base, and I'm not sure that kind of thing is going to fly under someone like Mike Vrabel. So what were some of the things that got players in that doghouse, just so Patriots fans have an idea of what things will not fly under his potential regime?
Well, repeat mistakes. He frequently said it, including the language "dumb bleep" that hurts the team. He didn't have a high tolerance for dumb bleep that hurt the team, and he talked about that on a regular basis. Soft tissue injuries, particularly that guys had repeatedly, and he was big on what guys did from the time they left the team, like now, until they reported back for the beginning of the offseason program, and the work they did in that time, the work they did from mid-June to mid-July when they came back, those 5 weeks maybe that players were on their own. And he thought those 2 sections of time away for guys that worked with the team were really invaluable in terms of setting the tone and what could happen to them with soft tissue injuries. And they had several guys that were what he called repeat offenders, and he called them out for it. David Long was a linebacker that they didn't re-sign. He went down to Miami. He didn't have as big a problem for a while, and all the Titans fans were like, well, that's the Titans' fault. Ultimately, it didn't work out for him in Miami. Christian Fulton, another guy who played okay for the Chargers for a while and then wound up with hamstring problems again. And he's just a guy with hamstring problems. And Vrabel tried to weed those people out. But they also had huge injury problems while he was here, and they've had huge injury problems in the year since he left, that a lot of people wanted to account to him overworking guys during the week, but there's no evidence to suggest how much that's on him and how much and I'm with him on that. Colton Dowell, a 7th round receiver here, tore his ACL getting tied up on a double team on a special teams play running up the sideline. And that's not the team's training staff or Mike Vrabel's usage, just crap luck. And but they've had too much crap luck under him and in the year without him.
Interesting, the David Long piece. I remember when they kind of let him go. I was so curious because I always loved the tape that I saw as a player, but that makes a lot of sense. If it's just the being able to actually be on the field, we know that was big under Belichick, and I'm sure that's a message that he carried as well.
Ironically, they tried to bring David Long back maybe with 3 games left in the season, 2 games left in the season, because they're needed to replenish inside linebacker or at least special teams, and he failed his physical.
The most unfortunate kind of irony, I would think. But overall, I think Patriots fans, it'll be music to their ears to hear. They heard, don't make repeat mistakes from Gerard Mayo, but then it turned out he was making the repeat mistakes, and so were his players. So someone who's going to hold himself and the rest of the squad accountable, I think that's going to be a very nice change of pace. We're going to get more into what didn't go so well for Mike Vrabel because we got to get the full picture and much more. But first, quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks. Be right back.
Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you got to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. So run your game all season long on Prize Picks. It is playoff time, which means it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. You can now win up to 1,000 times that money on Prize Picks, and they now offer MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. Prize Picks also puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure, and when your picks hit, you get your money in as little as 15 minutes. All you have to do is download the Prize Picks app and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code CLNS on the Prize Picks app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
All right, so we've alluded to it, right? The last couple seasons didn't go so well for Mike Vrabel. I've heard it kind of sounded like it was just about everything but primarily coaching. But from your perspective, what exactly was it that led to their downfall? And what were the things that Mike Vrabel also was responsible for? Because when the team does decline, I feel like it can't at all be on the, or none of it can't be on the head coach's hands, if that makes sense.
Well, his coaching staff wasn't good enough. And I read a piece or two, maybe one from Boston, that gave him credit for hiring offensive coordinators well. He didn't. Matt LaFleur was his offensive coordinator his first season. That was John Robinson, his general manager. Matt LaFleur interviewed for Mike Vrabel's job with the Titans. And when he didn't get it, and Vrabel didn't get Ryan Day as his offensive coordinator and maybe somebody else that he wanted, it seemed like John Robinson said, hey, Matt LaFleur interviewed for the head coaching job. I like him a lot. Why don't you take a look at him for offensive coordinator? And he brought him in. And Matt LaFleur wasn't a great offensive coordinator in his 1 year here. And then Green Bay hired him early rather than late to be head coach. And he's obviously taken off there, but he also stepped into the end of the Aaron Rodgers era and a good roster in Green Bay, and has taken off into a very good head coach. He replaced him wisely with Arthur Smith, and Arthur Smith was a very good offensive coordinator here. But Arthur Smith had been on the staff of 2 or 3 previous Titans head coaches, working his way up the ranks here. So credit to Vrabel for recognizing that he was the right guy to promote, but he didn't find Arthur Smith somewhere. He inherited Arthur Smith. And then after Arthur Smith got the job with the Falcons, he turned to Todd Downing, who he had brought in to coach tight ends to replace Arthur Smith. Todd Downing, terrible offensive coordinator, terrible play caller. I'm told that he is a good football coach, but not a good play caller. That was certainly the case here. It was certainly the case with the Jets this year. He didn't, when he got his chance there, that proved to be the case again. And then after 2 years, he replaced him with Tim Kelly, who was involved in Houston with a little bit with Deshaun Watson when he was a good football player there. And, Kelly didn't have the greatest stuff to work with, but hardly solved the Titans' offensive problems in a big system switch. So the offensive coordinators were not good enough. And that's a challenge for Vrabel. If you're going to have a good young offensive coordinator, and he's good, He's going to get hired away like LaFleur did and like Arthur Smith did for a head coaching job. And you better have people on your staff to funnel through and keep that going. Any defensive head coach is going to have that issue. And I don't think Vrabel was as prepared for it as he should have been. He stuck with a special teams coach who he just thought the media, I had multiple conversations with him where he just kept telling me, I didn't understand. But I understood the kick returns and the punt returns that they were giving up on a regular basis. I understood that they never found a returner who wasn't at more risk to fumble than he was to pop off a big return. And I understood that finally, Craig Aukerman, his offensive coordinator, was fired during his last season when the special teams gave up 2 punt blocks, the second of which resulted in his punter breaking his leg and dislocating or tearing his ACL when he waited so long to make a move on that. So if he hires some of these people when he gets his next head coaching job, that would set off alarm bells to me. I hope, and I've told him this, just BSing with him, you better do a better job with your assistant coaches and your staff in your next stop than you did here, rather than thinking that, when he fired Keith Carter, the offensive line coach who went to the Jets, he had an opportunity. The offensive line was a disaster for a share of his term here. After Derrick Henry had run for 2,000 yards and they had done great work, it fell apart. And they had a chance to hire go out and get somebody with experience and everything. And instead he hired Keith Carter's assistant, who he said blew him away with his interview. Well, a great interview didn't give him any experience, which he had none of. He was bashed for that hiring, and the offensive line certainly, it didn't get much better personnel, but also didn't get much better coaching.
So that kind of hit on what my concerns were with Mike Vrabel. Is one, the fact that, he would have to, if the offensive coordinator or play caller that he hires does have success and they keep having success and he does well, he's going to have to keep hiring these guys and show that he can identify talent. And not only that, but the Patriots, as a guy who wants more control, right? I don't think he wants to have full say. I think he wants to work with the general manager, whoever's going to be at the top, wants to work with ownership, but he's going to want to have some say. So I'm curious, when it comes to building out that part, like the coaching staff, and also even for the Patriots, the analytics department and the personnel building is very, very behind. So are you confident? And I know there was a piece on like him working with the Browns and getting some perspective from them. Would you be confident that he has what it takes to build that staff and to build out some of the other departments and make the Patriots the more well-rounded kind of group, not just from a personnel perspective, but also from really a team building perspective?
Not analytics. No. He's not a big outward believer. I mean, he believes in them, and you saw what he did to the Patriots in that one game where he took the rules loophole and he abused it. He understands stuff like that, and he was a good clock manager and a good user of the rules. And he says all the time, you tell us what the rules are, and we'll play by them. And he always knew exactly how to best take advantage of things. He also once punted in a crucial game, maybe a playoff game, might have been the playoff game against the Bengals the year that they had the number 1 seed and then lost at home despite sacking the quarterback 9 times, where he punted from across midfield on a 4th and 2. With the game deep in the 4th quarter. So not a very analytical decision on that one, but he relied on himself and his right-hand man, John Stryker, who now works for the Los Angeles Rams, and they did the bulk of the analytics. And he wasn't big on buying into the analytics push that the Titans are making now with Chad Brinker running the thing. I don't think he's big on having a big analytics department with a lot of stuff. I think he thinks it's really his realm, and that you don't need a big thing. Now maybe his ideas on that change if he's picking those people, or if it's his department instead of somebody else's department. But I think he thinks it's largely overdone by a lot of people.
And then when it comes to the defensive coaching staff, we touched on offense, where a lot of the success he had was from people who were already there. How did you feel he did when it came to evaluating talent on that side of the coaching staff?
Well, it was shaky for a while with Shane Bowen. So he had Dean Pease initially, which was a good job. An experienced defensive coordinator who he had a good relationship with his playing days to be a sounding board for him early on. And then I think things went south a little bit. Some players later told stories. Maybe him. I don't know if I'm remembering it absolutely correctly, but I feel like he took the chalk out of Dean's hands. Maybe Dean retired, and then he had a year where he refused to call Shane Bowen, who was coaching outside linebackers, the defensive coordinator. But Bowen was kind of the defensive coordinator. Then the next year, he finally promoted him to defensive coordinator. And then there was still some confusion as to whether Mike was in charge of the defense or Bowen was in charge of the defense. And then finally, Bowen was like given, clearly control of the defense. But I do think he had some good assistance on defense. I think he's a very good teacher on both sides of the ball. I think he's a very good teacher. And I think that comes from his dad having been a coach and a teacher. And I think some of those things are very effective. I don't think players are used to seeing a guy, and he's getting older, but he still, hits the gym and hits the sleds. And, you saw highlights of him in Cleveland as an advisor running sprints with Jameis Winston. I don't think he's equipped to beat anybody anymore, but he sure as hell is going to compete. And I think players love that.
And even the stories of him getting knocked around by the interior offensive line where they're like, dude, you're going to get hurt. You got to be careful out here. Hopefully he makes sure he doesn't get himself hurt as the head coach if he is in New England or wherever he is. We want Vrabel to stay safe. All right, we got just a couple more questions to close this out. But first, quick word from our friends over at Game Time. Be right back.
This episode is also powered by Game Time, the best place to get tickets to anything, concerts, games, and more. They have the Game Time Picks feature that makes getting tickets even easier. It filters out the fluff and only shows you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets to find the best value. They also have the lowest price guarantee, and they have seat views to check out exactly what it's going to look like from your seat. So make sure you download the Game Time app today to take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, Paul. So just to wrap this one up, obviously Mike Vrabel has a lot of places that he could grow as a coach. Like I know I've heard that his play calling was too conservative. I know defensively he says he wants to be diverse up front, pretty simple on the back end. Then obviously you have Derrick Henry and Brian Tannehill, probably going to be a run first team. So would you agree that maybe he was a little too conservative, too straightforward as a coach and as a play caller? Obviously he wasn't the one doing it, but he's still the head coach and it's his system. And where do you think he can improve at his next stop?
Well, I think offensively he played to what he had. He did say at one time later on when people were being presumptive that heavy run game was kind of his thing. He said, look, I walked into Derrick Henry. If I had walked into something else, we might have been something else. And he famously told Ed Werder at one point near the end of a season, or maybe even heading into a playoff game, like if we wanted to throw the ball 50 times, who the hell would we throw it to? Kind of talking about the personnel that they had and didn't have. And listen, the Titans have been a wide receiver black hole for years and years and years. They have Calvin Ridley now, who they signed. A.J. Brown was the only receiver they drafted and developed, who turned into like a really good wide receiver in like 20 years. And then his GM traded him away, in a deal where they tried to get Traylon Burks to be Justin Jefferson to Stephon Diggs. That trade doesn't go that way in the Titans world. So I think he played to his strengths. They weren't always aggressive. He had teams, his best teams played good third down defense. They played good red zone defense. They played good 2-minute offense and defense. They were good situational teams that played smart, where the big yardage stats might not have been good, but the important stuff was. And I think he could do that. I think, if he came and had Drake May, who we saw this year, and obviously did some impressive things even in the loss to Tennessee. That'd be as good a quarterback situation as he had since peak Ryan Tannehill. And peak Ryan Tannehill, it was a limited offense. It was a play action pass offense off Derrick Henry running. But I don't know about his player evaluation. I mean, the guys that were clearly his, he had some hits and misses. And the Titans at their best during his time were based around early John Robinson GM, where he was good talent wise. And then John Robinson fell off the face of the world and started drafting guys like Isaiah Wilson and Caleb Farley and Traylon Burks, whose collective contribution was absolutely minimal. And when you have 3 first-round picks like that, you're not going to be a very good football team.
You said it very well. That's a good way to sum it up. Hopefully, Patriots have plenty of personnel issues, but at least when you have the quarterback, a lot of cap space, a lot of draft capital. Once again, if Mike Vrabel were to choose New England, you hope maybe he gets some guys that can be more of the A.J. Brown kind of mold and less of, everything that John Robinson picked towards the end. But Paul, thank you so much for your time.
And I think let me add one thing. I think he's either in New England or he's in Oakland or Las Vegas. Sorry.
Yep.
I think there's other places. He said as much in The Athletic, but it's obvious from his experience here. Stable ownership and a chance with the quarterback. So, Raiders have a decent pick, but I think Brady clearly is going to be taking on a bigger role there. He would have a say in who the GM was if they hired him as head coach, and these other jobs are just don't offer nearly as much. Chicago has a quarterback, but ownership seems kind of wimpy. The Jets are a mess. I think those are the 2 most favorable jobs for the most favorable candidate.
So now I got to ask, do you think that Mike Vrabel took the interview with the Jets as kind of a way to get the Patriots' attention?
We'll see. I mean, some people go so far as to speculate that, Vrabel was in place in New England when Mayo was fired, and he took the interview with the Jets for intel.
Oh, okay. I hadn't actually heard that little bit, but that is interesting. But I will leave with that fun nugget. So once again, Paul, seriously, I really, really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much for being on. Now, before I let you go, please let the people know where they can find you and what's up maybe we should be looking out for if anybody wants to get caught up with what's going on down there in Music City.
I'm at Paul Kuharsky, NFL on Twitter /X. I don't call it X. At Paul Kuharsky, KUHARSKY, NFL on Twitter. Come check it out.
Don't call it X. I knew I liked you, Paul. Thank you so much once again. And thank you all, as always, for watching. Now, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We will see you next time. Peace, y'all.